I've got 3 mini shotgun microphones. They're all about the same price. They're all unpowered. They're all really tiny. And we're gonna have a mini shotgun shootout, and there can only be one winner. Hey, it's Matt Haynes, and today I've got the Deity V-Mic D4 Mini, and I've also got the Saramonic SR-VM1, and I've got the Sennheiser MKE-200. Now, I'm currently using the Deity D4 Mini because I've been using it for a while. I'm familiar with it. I figured I'd start with that one. I'm interested to hear the Sennheiser MKE-200 because I've been using their MKE-600 in the studio as a proper shotgun mic for a long time, and Sennheiser is known for quality. So it's an unusual looking mic, but I have some high hopes for it. Now, the Saramonic, it was the cheapest of the 3, and it looks the cheapest of the 3 too. So I don't have a lot of hope for that one, but that's my early predictions. I don't know yet. We got to go test these. Now, this is somewhat of an extreme environment because I've got a freeway off in the distance and I've got a busy street right next to me. It is a shotgun mic though, so I'm hoping it's going to focus more on me than on the traffic. I guess I'll know when I get back to the studio and start my edit. The Deity V-Mic D4 Mini has some really cool features. First of all, it comes with this really giant fluffy dead cat. The dead cat does a really good job of cutting down wind noise. It also comes with a couple of different cables, so you can plug it either directly into an analog camera input, or you can plug it into a TRRS input on a phone. And another cool and kind of unusual feature is that it has an auxiliary input on the side of it. So you can actually hook up a lavalier mic or another microphone input to it, and then when you do, it will split your signal left and right so that the D4 Mini is on one channel and your auxiliary input is on the other, so you can mix those independently in your editing software. Now on the camera I have the Sennheiser MKE-200, and this is certainly the most quirky microphone of the 3. It's an unusual shape for sure, and the dead cat is this giant fluffy L-shaped fur ball that covers the entire microphone, not just the top. So it's almost like it's designed to keep it warm rather than protect it from wind noise. In terms of additional accessories or features, there's not a whole lot on the MKE-200. You've got a cable. It has a locking mechanism on the microphone side, which is nice. But other than that and the dead cat, there are no switches, there are no controls. It's just plug it in and you're good to go. Now on the camera, I have the Saramonic SR-VM1, and it's the least expensive of the microphones. It has a feature. But what it doesn't have is a dead cat. All it has is a pop filter, and pop filters don't do a very good job of cutting wind noise down, so I'll be interested to hear how it handles wind noise. It comes with a cable to plug it into your camera, and it also has a low cut switch, which I mean can help with wind noise a little bit. It could also help with plosives if you're very close to the mic. Having a low cut switch is not as good as having a dead cat on the camera, but let me just flip that switch there for you. You can hear how it sounds. All right, now we've got the low cut turned on, and I believe it's 100 hertz low cut, which if you have a very low voice, you might start to hear some thinning, but that's also going to cut out some of the really low rumbling that you might hear from wind. Other than that, the Saramonic doesn't really come with anything. It just has the cable and the pop filter and the added switch, and it didn't even come with a case. It just came in plastic packaging like you might see hanging from a store shelf. Now I wanted to let you hear how these microphones reject sound from the sides and the back, because that's what a shotgun microphone does. It focuses where it's pointing, and it ignores, to some extent, sounds coming from the side and the back. So right now we're listening to the Deity D4 Mini, and it's pointing right at my face on axis. And now we are 90 degrees off to the axis on one side. And now we are at 180 degrees off axis. And now we're 90 degrees on the other side. And we're back to on axis. This is the Sennheiser MKE-200 on the camera, and you're hearing its on axis response. Now you're hearing 90 degrees off to one side. This is 180 degrees off axis. This is 90 degrees on the other side. And we're back to on axis response. On the camera now I have the Saramonic, and I'm going to show you the on axis off axis response here. The microphone is pointing directly at my face. Now we have 90 degrees off to one side. Now we have 180 degrees away from me. Now we have 90 degrees off to the other side. And back to on-axis response. There's a lot more testing I want to do with these 3 microphones, but for that, we got to head over to the local park. There's some other things I wanted to test about these microphones, specifically how they handle, well, handling noise, and also be a little bit more precise with the wind testing to see if they reject wind properly. So the first thing I'm going to do is test for handling noise. Now, this camera is on a monopod, and I want to see if the microphones pick up any noise when I move my hands around the monopod. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toss this camera back and forth and listen to see if we hear any impact noise, if we hear any like resonant noises from the shock mount, things like that. Now, you are listening to the Deity V-Mic D4 Mini, and let's go. I'm tapping on the monopod near the base of it here. Now, you're going to hear some noise just transmitted through the air, but what we're listening for is like thumpings and stuff that's obviously transmitted through vibration through the camera, through the shock mount, and into the microphone itself. So let's do that again. Tapping the base. I see the microphone wiggling a little bit in the shock mount, and I'm going to tap with my ring on the metal of the monopod. This is the Saramonic, and we're checking for handling noise. Okay, I'm tapping on the base, tapping on the base of the monopod, and I'm tapping my ring on the metal of the monopod. This is the Sennheiser MKE-200, and we're testing for handling noise. Now I'm tapping on the base of the monopod. And now I'm going to click my ring on it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check for wind noise. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to orbit the camera around me, and that'll create a sideways motion that'll make consistent wind or air movement noises. And I will check it with and without dead cats and pop filter. So the first microphone we're testing here is the D4 Mini, and let's give it a listen. All right, let's take the dead cat off and do the same thing. There we go. This is the Saramonic with a pop filter on. Let's test for wind noise. Okay, and let's take the pop filter off. And testing for wind noise with the pop filter off. This is the Sennheiser MKE-200, and we're going to test for wind noise, first with the dead cat on. You have no idea how stupid I look to the cars driving by. Okay, we're going to take off this dead cat, which on the Sennheiser takes some doing, so give me a moment. Now the dead cat is off on the Sennheiser. Let's do a wind check again. There is one more test that I want to do on these microphones before we start talking about conclusions and results and things like that. However, before we do, I just wanted to ask you, are you enjoying these kinds of in-depth, hard-as-nails reviews that I do on products? If you are, would you hit that like button? Because that actually tells the YouTube algorithm that you like these kinds of reviews. By the way, if you were thinking of using these microphones on a GoPro, it's not going to work, at least not as is. The problem with that is that the GoPro's lens is really, really wide, and because the camera's so small, all of these microphones are really close to the lens, so they all show up in your shot. especially if you got a dead cat on or a pop filter. The only exception was the Sennheiser. If you took off the dead cat, mounted it on the side cold shoe of the media mod, that would work. Otherwise, it's not going to work as is. However, you can offset the microphone with something else, and I've done that before with a light, but it gets really clunky at that point. Okay, let's talk about sound quality in these microphones. And by the way, I'm not using any one of these microphones for this conclusion. I'm using a dynamic microphone here just to I don't know, give you a break from listening to 3 different microphones all at once. Now, sound quality. It is job number 1 for a microphone. If it doesn't sound good, then everything else is pretty pointless, right? But it's interesting to look at the Sennheiser's response graph because, wow, what a roll-off. It's starting at about 500 hertz. What that means is, unless you have a really high squeaky voice, this is attenuating your fundamental low frequency in your voice. And that's why I think it sounds so thin. I found the roll-off on the Sennheiser really quite shocking. And I suspect it's because they're trying to compensate for wind noise that they're not handling some other way. I'm not sure. I don't know. They don't call me, so, I have no idea. So that's why it sounds thin compared to the Deity and the Saramonic. When you compare the Deity and the Saramonic, I would say they're roughly similar in terms of sound quality. I do feel like the Deity had a bit more of a mid-range boost, which could aid in intelligibility. I felt like the Saramonic sounded a little bit more even and flat. So these are really little details. I would be happy with the sound quality of either one of these mics on my camera. So it's a slightly convoluted setup here, but obviously I'm filming on my studio camera and I'm also filming on the Sony ZV-1, which has the mini microphone attached to it. This is the same camera I was using for the field testing, so it should be kind of an apples to apples comparison. First up on the camera, we have the Deity D4 Mini. This is with no pop filter. This is how the microphone sounds just by itself. Now on the camera, I have the Deity D4 Mini with the pop filter. So this is what the dead cat sounds like on the Deity D4 Mini. All right, we have the Saramonic SR-VM1 on the Sony right now, and this is without the pop filter that comes with it. This is just the bare plain microphone. This is what the Saramonic sounds like with no pop filter on it. Now you are listening to the Saramonic SR-VM1 with the pop filter on. This is the foam pop filter that is included with the microphone. There is no dead cat that comes with it. This is what it sounds like with the pop filter on the Saramonic. Now we have the Sennheiser MKE-200 on the Sony, and it is with no dead cat. It is just the plain microphone by itself. This is what the Sennheiser MKE-200 sounds like with no dead cat. Now you are listening to the Sennheiser MKE-200, and it does have the big old furry dead cat on there. This is what the Sennheiser sounds like with the dead cat installed. So now you've had a chance to compare the sound quality with and without dead cats or pop filters, and here's my take on it. I felt that the Deity did the worst job in terms of having a transparent dead cat. It's also got the fluffiest dead cat, so that probably has something to do with it. I can hear a little bit of a loss in the highs when you put the dead cat on the Deity V-Mic D4 Mini. The Sennheiser's dead cat sounded pretty transparent to me. Again, the sound quality on the MKE-200 is not very good. So the fact that it doesn't change that much, I don't know. I mean, I didn't hear a lot of high frequency loss. It sounded relatively transparent, but a lot of that might be that I'm not hearing any low end to begin with. Now for me, the Saramonic almost sounded better with the pop filter than without. It almost sounded, without the pop filter, it kind of sounded a little more boxy, a little bit more mid-rangey. I don't know how a pop filter would do that, quite frankly, but that's just my perception. And if you're hearing something different, let me know in the comments because, perception is really relative. Now speaking of dead cats, the Deity D4 Mini and the Sennheiser MKE-200 did a really nice job blocking wind. And as predicted, the Saramonic did next to nothing blocking wind with its pop filter. That's just not what they're designed to do. They are designed to block plosives, not wind. Now, when you take those dead cats off, I think the Deity did the worst in terms of handling wind noise, which is probably why they built such a big dead cat for it in the first place. They just knew that it was going to crumble when the wind blew. But that's what a dead cat's for. The Saramonic, I mean, it didn't do very well with the pop filter off. It sounded very much like with the pop filter being on. Now, interestingly, I think the Sennheiser actually did a pretty good job of wind noise rejection, even with the dead cat off. Now, some of that might be because there's absolutely no low end coming into the microphone at all, which is mostly what wind noise is. But it also might be that funky little design they've got going, I think cuts down. It's almost like a blimp, which is an enclosure for a microphone on a movie set. Now, handling noise. This was interesting. I thought the Rycote shock mount on the Deity did a great job of reducing thumps and bumps and clicks and stuff, transmitting up through the monopod, through the camera body, through the mount and into the microphone. Yeah, there's a certain point where it does get through and you can hear it like reaches a threshold. I think what's going on is that the actual shock mount is just reaching the extent of its movement and then it's hitting things. But for lighter taps and thumps and stuff, it did a really good job. The Saramonic never claimed to have any shock mount and you can hear it. It's just all the noise, boom, 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 all the way up the monopod. Now, Sennheiser in their ads and literature say that the microphone has internal shock mounting. Well, does it? I don't know. I mean, I didn't think it did a very good job at all. I think there was almost as many thumps and bumps coming up through that monopod as there were on the Saramonic, who made no claims to shock mounting. So really disappointed in Sennheiser in terms of handling noise. All right, let's talk about features, conveniences, you know, those little things that make your recording life a little bit easier. The Deity, I love the auxiliary input. I've already used it several times. So if you're doing interviews where you want two people recorded separately, this is great. As for the Saramonic, it doesn't have a lot of features. Well, it's got one. And that feature is the low roll off, so that you can roll off low frequencies if you need to. Now, that will compensate if you've got some wind rumble. I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's certainly handy to have. Now, as for Sennheiser, they seem to go the opposite direction with features, like by adding negative features. Now, the dead cat does cut down wind, don't get me wrong, and that's what it's for. But in every other way, the dead cat fails. It is a big fail because it takes like literally 5 minutes to get on. It's like putting on a sock that's 3 sizes too small. And then once it's on, you need to mount the microphone on your hot shoe of your camera. Well, the dead cat is so all-encompassing, it covers the tiny, tiny thumb wheel that you would use to tighten that up on your camera. So that's really difficult. And then you've got the cable that plugs in the front, and it's got that locking, well, okay, so it's got a feature. It's got a locking mechanism on the cable. That's great, except that you can't reach it because of the dead cat. And it's just, it's exhausting. With the dead cat on, the microphone is so strangely shaped, and they put the cable in the front, so it's really easy to put the microphone on backwards. There's nothing to tell you which direction it should point. The price points on these microphones are all about the same. I mean, they're within $10 to $20 of each other, but you know, with inflation and how things are changing a lot, those prices could change. So if you're interested in how much these microphones cost right now, would you click my affiliate links in the notes below? That'll tell you how much they cost. And of course, it helps me out. Now, if every item in my checklist were worth the same, then the Deity would win hands down. However, that's not the case in the real world. When you're dealing with a run and gun, unpowered shotgun mini mic like this, there's 2 things that I think are the most important features. That's sound quality and wind resistance, because these things are made to work outdoors. So when you factor in sound quality and wind resistance, the Deity wins by a landslide. I gotta say, my initial perceptions were really out of whack. You know, I thought the Deity, well, it was gonna do okay. I thought Sennheiser, you know, they've been doing this for 100,000 years. They were gonna be amazing. That Sennheiser MKE-200. And the Saramonic, I did not have any expectations for it whatsoever, but it kind of did okay in a very sort of defined niche. If you're the kind of videographer who doesn't go outside much, but you need an on-camera shotgun mic, I don't even know what that would look like. It sounds pretty good for the money, especially because it's the cheapest one here. So pleasantly surprised. Don't think I would use it. So Deity V-Mic D4 Mini, total winner in this. You know, there was another mini shotgun microphone I reviewed last year, and it wasn't any of these 3. So if you're in the market for a mini shotgun microphone to put on your camera, you should click right here.